Hello, everyone. This is Chris Adams with Balancing Act. Thank you for joining us today for Balancing Act Monthly. I'm delighted to be able to host a session with my hometown's Budget and Finance Office, Denver. They've done a terrific job with their taxpayer receipt, done a few sophisticated flourishes that make theirs a little bit unique, and so they have agreed to talk a little bit about how they made some of the decisions and calculations to come up with a useful and accurate taxpayer receipt for their residents. We'll begin that in just a moment. Before we do, I just want to say a quick word about Balancing Act Monthly. It's a monthly series that is intended to be an opportunity to learn about work that local governments around the country are doing on budget transparency, accountability, and participation. This is our Learn page on our website, and on the left lists today's session with Denver. And in the middle column, we've got the one that's coming up next week. That's going to be with City of Charlottesville, Virginia. And they've done a really nice job with compiling reports from their budget engagement. And so we'll ask them to share that with us a little bit. And then if you look on the far right there on past recordings, you can see the one that we did last week with Norfolk, Virginia. And they walked us through their thought process in terms of coming up with some of the policy and service level questions and fee and taxation level questions that they wanted to ask their residents. So if you are ever interested in learning about budget transparency, accountability, or engagement, please go to the Balancing Act website and look at the Learn tab. All right, so we try to keep the format for Balancing Act Monthly very simple. We're going to start out with Denver just to learn about their real world example. Then we'll have an opportunity for discussion, and we hope that there is some, but if not, that's just fine too. And then at the request of some clients who said, I didn't know Balancing Act could do that, we'll also just take about 2 or 3 minutes to learn about a new feature. And so one that we're really excited about right now is the ability to import from spreadsheets. Import data from spreadsheets. It's actually a really cool thing. Once you get your data into the right format on a spreadsheet, you can suck it right into Balancing Act and create a simulation. So I'll show you how to do that. And now I am pleased to introduce 2 presenters from the City and County of Denver. Rachel Barden is Senior Budget Analyst, and Courtney Law is Communications Director. So I'm going to turn it over to them now.
Hi, Chris. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you guys. And you should be getting control of the screen. There you are. Perfect.
We're good? Okay, great.
This is Courtney. I'm the Communications Director for the Denver Department of Finance, and I'll just get it started with the sort of bigger picture for this, and Rachel will get into the details with you. But just overall, one of our primary goals of the department is to make the city's finances as transparent and accessible as possible, and to be, ultimately good stewards of taxpayer money. The Department of Finance website provides a variety of financial documents and reports and information about business and property taxes, property assessments, county motor vehicle functions, and many other resources. We have something called Transparent Denver, which allows visitors to search for city contracts and review investment and debt portfolios, and to review what we call the open checkbook, which is the city's payment transactions. And the taxpayer receipt really fits well into that overall theme. It's really an additional tool for us to make the city's budget more transparent and to educate residents on how and where their money is spent. We sort of asked ourselves a question that we're all used to getting receipts for when we spend money on just about everything else, so why not get a receipt for when you pay your city taxes? And that was really the genesis of the taxpayer receipt, which we are proud to offer in English and Spanish.
Yeah, so when the Budget Office was tasked with creating this receipt, we had to really change the way we think, so not like wonky budget analysts / nerds, but rather thinking about taxpayers who are benefiting from these services. And so this meant really changing the nomenclature that we use. We're not talking only about funds, departments, and agencies or transfers, but rather about the services and the functions that they serve. So we also use the info icons, the feature in Balancing Act, to explain what these categories actually mean. and provide some examples in some instances. And we consolidated similar services for the purposes of making this 700-page budget more digestible. So beyond the creation of like how it looked, the presentation, we also had to be clear about which services are actually supported by taxpayer dollars and which taxes are included in the receipt. So what we included in the receipt are local sales taxes. So Denver has a 3.65% sales tax, of which 3.5% actually feeds into the general fund. That 0.15% goes to the Denver Preschool Program, which is not a service provided by the City and County of Denver, or CCD, as you'll see in these slides. And this tax receipt also includes residential property taxes, which are generated by mill levies, but that support the City and County of Denver. So this is only 40%, or really 37% of a local tax bill. I'll get into the specifics of that later. What is not included in the receipt, any federal taxes that a Denver resident pays, state taxes, again, that small share of the sales tax that goes to the Denver Preschool Program, and the local property taxes that they're paying that don't go to the City and County of Denver. So what services are included in the receipt? The general fund budget, a $1.4 billion budget in 2018, which, you know, most things that you would think about city services, the police department, fire department, parks, some health services, the mayor's office, all of these are in the general fund budget, and those are reflected in the taxpayer receipt. And also services that are not general fund supported, but are funded through property tax mills, but are still administered by the City and County of Denver. So we'll get into those in a little bit. And what is not included in the receipt would be any services the city might provide or administer, but are grant funded from the feds, from the state, or from private donations. So that some of our workforce development initiatives fall in that category. Additionally, as I mentioned before, the Denver Public Schools and the Denver Preschool Program are separate entities from the City and County of Denver. Okay, so when we talk about the sales taxes, as I said, there's the 3.65% sales tax, and we relied upon the Balancing Act to estimate how much people actually consume and what we can apply that 3.5%, which goes into the general fund, what we can apply that rate to. So they have a back-end algorithm that takes your age, that takes your income, and generates an estimated consumption upon which we apply that rate. And we also added another question, as you can see on the right-hand side in our receipt, and we'll do a demo in a little while, how much people are estimating how much they actually spend in Denver, so to get at that local sales tax amount. And all sales taxes go into the general fund, so no other funds are impacted by that. And 93% of the actual service categories that we included in our taxpayer receipt are supported by the general fund. So sales taxes are a portion of most of what you see in the receipt. So the calculation, as I said, there's this back-end algorithm that Balancing Act uses to generate consumption. We apply that 3.5% sales tax rate that goes to the general fund, and then we multiply that amount by the service, the particular service category, that share of the general fund. So let's take an example. We have a 30-year-old woman with an income of $65,000, and she says that she shops exclusively in Denver because she just loves her city so much. According to the algorithm generated by Balancing Act, she would pay about $585 in local sales taxes in 2018. And since the Denver Public Library, one of the services outlined in the receipt, comprises 3.47% of the 2018 general fund budget, we would multiply that by her total sales tax bill and get $20 in sales taxes that she's paying that supports the library. So that's actually the easier piece of the calculation. The more complicated part is the residential property taxes. So this is what you will see in the bill. We'll show you in a few moments. But a taxpayer entering their information on the taxpayer receipt would input whether they own a home. And there's a handy-dandy info icon next to that question that explains how we do our property tax assessments. They're conducted every other year. And just a little bit about property tax levies, and notes that, in fact, their property tax bill is going to be larger than what comes out in the receipt because only a fairly small portion, 37%, actually goes towards City and County of Denver services. So then people are asked to put in the actual value of their home. We put this info icon next to that question to ensure that they go to the Denver Assessor's Office website to look up the actual value, because what you actually purchased or what you paid for your home may in fact be more than what the assessor determined the value to be, or less. So we direct people there, we have them put in their actual value, and then that goes into the calculation. Now, property taxes are a little bit confusing, and this is why. To the right, you see an image of a 2018 property tax bill, and you'll note that all of those things to the left are the mills, and there's 11 property tax mills on this receipt. 8 of them actually support City and County of Denver services. So in terms of the amount of property taxes paid, it amounts to 37%. You see a large chunk of it goes to those first 2 mills, which relate to the Denver public school system. So these are the mills that are actually going to support the City and County of Denver: the capital maintenance, social services, city bond, police and fire pension, affordable housing, developmentally disabled, and lastly, our general fund. So this general fund is one of the largest, and this is the property tax mill that supports a lot of the city services. However, there are these other 7 mills that don't support the general fund, but those designated services outlined there. So as a result of the mills and the 2 sources of tax revenue, sales and property, we have kind of 3 ways that we calculate items on the receipt. One is if they're a general fund only service, so they are not supported by any other property tax mill besides the general fund. For those services, which is 47 of the 54 categories in the receipt, the sales tax receipt that you see will include a sales tax component. The tax receipt you see includes sales taxes and then also property taxes, and those property taxes are only from the general fund mill. The second category are services that are supported by a property tax mill that is not the general fund, so affordable housing. Oh, actually, no, that's in the third category, excuse me. Human services and developmental disability are 2 examples of those. The last category are items that are supported by both the general fund as well as another property tax mill. So these have sales taxes, general fund property tax mill taxes, and non-general fund property tax mill taxes coming out of there. So the affordable housing is actually one of those, because we support affordable housing in the general fund through transfers to special revenue funds, and we also have a dedicated affordable housing property tax mill that is only for the purpose of supporting affordable housing. So as a result of these 3 different, sources of revenue for a fairly simple service, so you're not going to understand this if you were to just go through the receipt. You wouldn't know the level of complexity on the back end, but because there's revenue coming from different places, because we're only thinking about tax revenue and not budget appropriations generally, it sort of pulled us out of our element a little bit, but we were able to focus and kind of come up with a way to simplify it and make it look reasonable to somebody who's just using the tool, even though it's fairly complicated because there's these different sources of revenue on the back end. I can take a pause there and see if anyone has any questions, or maybe this is a good time to look at the receipt itself, if that works.
Yes, and if anybody does have any questions, there's a little hand icon for you to raise your hand, and if you do that, we will unmute you. But in the meantime, I think it'd be great if you did do a demo for us. One of the main reasons why I wanted to ask Denver to share theirs is that Denver is a complex place for many reasons, including that it's both a city and a county, and so its property tax structure is more complicated than, I'm going to say, most. But the nice thing about it is that for the resident, the complexity is on the back end. So Rachel and her group, they need to wrestle with all of that. And on the development side, we need to wrestle with how do we represent that in the software. But to the resident, it's actually pretty simple and straightforward, and I think a good communications tool. And so I don't see any hands up, Rachel, so why don't you just go ahead and show people what Denver's tax receipt looks like.
Awesome. So this is the launching page from the Department of Finance website for Denver. As you see, you can press English or Spanish. So we'll do English because I don't speak Spanish. And so here we are, launching page. So to the right, I'm just going to point out that there is this about icon, And this just explains what this tool is for and what it represents and what it does not represent. And then you can also click here and go to the 2018 budget, which we will not do right now. We will look at the receipt. So let's do the example that I had suggested earlier, $65,000 income, age is 30, shops exclusively in Denver, and do I own a home? Here's where you get all of that boring information about property tax mills and assessments, etc. But good information to know. I'm going to say, yes, I do own a home, and the actual value of my residence, I would click here to be taken to the Denver Assessor's website, but instead of doing that, I'm just going to put in $250K for my home, and I'm going to view my receipt. So here's a fairly long receipt, I think, relative to some of the other jurisdictions and states that have used this tool, but again, we were actually consolidating quite a bit into these categories. So there's main categories like affordable housing, and I can click here. This is one of the more difficult ones because it says it includes property tax mill revenue and general fund support. So that's the third most complicated option here for affordable housing, but we get a sense of what that service is for. So you kind of go down, we have capital, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry, I'm having a weird thing with my mouse. I apologize. Get parks, public safety, and even if, obviously this is a rough estimate, this bill, but it's helpful in terms of understanding the order of magnitude that we are allocating in resources for each type of service. So public safety is something that we invest in heavily in this city. It's $330 according to this person's rough estimate bill. Public works is $64, which is less, but it's more than other things. So, sorry, did you want to say something?
Yeah, just from a communication standpoint, I like, first of all, Rachel explained how complicated the back end was, but what you saw was just a few questions that people needed to answer in order to have something generated that shows them exactly where their dollars go and what good it's providing to the city. A lot of times I think it's easy to feel like taxes might, just sort of go generally toward government and you not understand how it sort of gets parsed out, but talking about funding homeless services and streetlights and capital projects, I think really helped people feel more connected to where those dollars go ultimately.
Mm-hmm. And then to go back to the nerdy piece, if you click the info icon at the bottom, you can see the breakout between the sales taxes and the property taxes that you're paying. And that's really it. Unless people have questions, I am prepared to talk in more detail about property taxes if people are interested. But that was a lot of information, so we can stop here. Chris, did you have any specific questions? I'm not sure where to see hands, so I don't know if there are questions.
Oh, sorry, and there aren't any, and I had accidentally muted myself while I coughed. But once again, raise your hands if you have any questions, and if you don't, Rachel, I did get to see your slides yesterday, and I thought they were pretty good. So why don't you go ahead and show those, and then we'll see where we are after that.
Okay, cool. So quick review of property tax calculations, how they go. So your property taxes that you pay on your home reflect the actual home value. So again, we encourage people to go to the assessor's office to get what is the assessed or the actual value is determined by them, times the residential tax rate, times the mill levy rate. So in our example before, $250K is the home value. The state residential tax rate in Colorado is 7.2%. So the 7.2% times the home value is going to give you your assessed value, in case you've heard that terminology thrown around. And then this is multiplied by the mill levy rate. So for the person who has a home valued $250K in Denver, they're paying $141.97 for the general fund, because the mill levy I selected here is the general fund. So if we want to know how that translates to the receipt, we can look at the library subcategory again. Since this is budgeted in the general fund, we're going to take the property tax mill for the general fund, and we simply take the home value, $250K, times the residential rate, 7.2%, times the general fund mill levy, and then multiply that amount, which was the $141 you saw on the previous slide, times the library share of the general fund, or 3.47%. So the property taxes that you pay of that total bill, you're spending $4.93 on the library. So the bill that you would actually see in the receipt is going to reflect the total of the sales taxes and also the property taxes. For the second example, this is an example where there's only a dedicated property tax mill for this service. There isn't a general fund component. So it's actually more simple. You just take the home value times the residential rate and times that mill. This one actually is 2 mills. I combined bond principal and interest, which are technically 2 separate mills. But again, since there's no general fund component, there's no sales tax component. So what you see in the receipt is just the property taxes you're paying for this purpose. And lastly, we have the most complicated one, which is when there's general fund support and there's a separate property tax mill. So you see the general fund component is the home value times the residential rate times the general fund mill levy times that share of the budget. And then you get the affordable housing property tax mill component. And that's just the home value times the residential rate and times that mill. And so this is the component. And then in the actual receipt, you would see a total greater than that because it would also have the sales taxes that are going into the general fund. And that is all she wrote.
And Rachel, thank you. I really wanted to feature you on this peer learning environment because you really did some great work to take something that's pretty complicated and to express it in a simple and meaningful and accountable way to residents. And I also wanted Denver to share theirs because it's been the most complex to date. Typically, even if you take a medium-sized city, say in California, like Corona, California, or Moreno Valley, setting theirs up is really quite simple. They don't have all of these dedicated mills, and it's really just a matter of setting up their sales tax and their property tax, and there's just one calculation for each. We have done some other complicated things, such as for municipalities in Minnesota. Minnesota actually has a progressive residential property tax, which I did not know about, but they have it both at the residential level and at the business level. So there are some ways to make some adaptations on the back end. Once again, it takes a good analyst like Rachel to make sense of it, but there are ways to express that through the software, and once again, provide that simple accountability tool that is the receipt. It's something that people have come to expect for most things that they pay for, and now it's available at least in a dozen or so cities for their taxes as well. So thank you very much, Rachel and Courtney, for sharing what Denver has done.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now, I'd like to just quickly, as the last part of Balancing Act Monthly is to just talk about a new feature. And so I want to share with you the new import feature. So for those of you who are thinking about either doing a new version of your simulation or doing a new one, it's a pretty simple and very handy thing to do. And so I think you're looking at my screen right now, and I want to go here. So Balancing Act relies on, let's see, what am I looking for here? I'm looking for this. Is that going to work for me? Oh, I know what happened. Excuse me. I had a hot link in there. There. So this is the slide I was looking for. There's 5 layers of data that go into Balancing Act, and so by importing it, we just have to get those 5 layers into machine-readable format. The top level is category, and in this case, it's public safety. The next level is subcategory. In this case, it's police. And then the next level is subcategory amount, and in this case, it's $254 million. Those are the only 3 required pieces of information to create an item for interaction on Balancing Act. But we think it's really critical and a missed opportunity to not also use some of the explanatory opportunities. So if you click the blue info icon, you get an opportunity to make up to, I think it's 400 characters worth of explanatory information, so a long tweet. And then if you want more information, you can have more details. More details was recently expanded to be able to include all sorts of things, graphics, pictures, You can embed widgets. So if you're using some transparency software and you can embed a widget, you can do that. You can now embed a video. City of San Antonio a few years ago had a really terrific program called SA Speak Up, and they created some compelling videos. And with the new software, if they wanted to embed those videos actually right into the balancing act simulation, they could do that. So we're really excited about these new features. But anyway, that's the data taxonomy. Let me now show you how quick and easy it is to import something. So this is the new interface for Balancing Act. It's a really nice, clean interface. And I'm going to have to slide some things over here. So you would just go here to create simulation, and you'd give it a name, and let's just call it test. And you choose your language. It used to be that you'd also have to, we'd have to switch your language on the back end. Now you just select it. And we're going to say start from scratch, and then say continue. And then if we're going to select import from CSV. If you want the template, you just click right here, but I've already got one created. So I'm going to go ahead and import from CSV. And so I'm going to import revenue. And then here it asks just for a broad categorization. You can skip this if you want, or if you want to sort of keep track of things at a high level, such as income tax, fines, more vehicle fee, personal income tax, property tax, sales tax, et cetera, you can. For the sake of time, I'll skip that. And now we've got our revenue categories created. And then you go to spending and you import your CSV, and it creates that for you. And I'll go ahead and skip those. And then we went from nothing to now having, this isn't an extensive simulation. It just has two categories on either side. We've got police here, police patrol, and then we've got a little information on it. And we've got the more details. And then over here on taxes, we've got sales tax, real estate tax, et cetera. So it's really simple to do that. And once you get that information in, you can go here and you can add more details, and you can add photos, and there's a rich text editor. You can embed something. It's a really nice way to add some additional information. If you want, this is where you can convert to a scenario question. So if you have a service level question or a tax level question, that's where you can make that. And then standard plus minus settings, you can now set floors and ceilings. You can toggle between dollars and percentages, or you can change the increment of increase or decrease. So this new software was just released about two weeks ago, and it's much improved. And so for those of you who are working with us, we will be contacting you to upgrade your site. We're sort of doing about 10 a week, just so we make sure that we're doing quality control along the way. So that is really it for Balancing Act Monthly for today. Oh, this is what the spreadsheet looks like that we use. This is what the format needs to look like. It just has to have category, subcategory, and amount. Those are the required 3 items. And then the 2 optional ones are more info and more details. So that's it for Balancing Act Monthly. Our next one is in April, and it will feature Maya Kumazawa, who is a senior budget and policy analyst with the city of Charlottesville, and she's done a really great job with coming up with ways to present reports and information to senior professional staff and to city council. So she'll be sharing that with us as well. And they've also done a nice job with publicizing the report. They put a flyer in the utility bills that went out, and I think last time I checked, it had the highest rate of participation, not the highest level, but the highest rate of participation of anybody so far on Balancing Act. So we look forward to that, and I look forward to hopefully seeing you all next month, or having you all on Balancing Act Monthly. And once again, if you have any questions or comments or any ideas, please don't hesitate to be in touch. Special thanks to Courtney and Rachel, and we'll sign off now. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Chris.